In the last video, we talked about the importance of looking at the outer world, or as Neville Goddard refers to, the screen of space, as both inspirational, as in if you look at the example of how you see something that reflects what you desire to see, you find yourself inspired by it, and thus awakening certain thoughts that you affirm to be true, that confirm that you are on the journey to experiencing what you desire, or revealing. In other words, bringing forth a deeper level of understanding of what's within the subconscious, a lot of times through what we call reactivity. So thus, we want to remember that what has been brought forth on the screen of space has been what we had once imagined. If you look around in this world, you'll see that everything that we brought forth was once in our imagination. All of the innovation, all of what we desired to see as far as experiences go, what we desired to taste, touch, feel, smell, was once in the imagination. For example, if you desired to bring forth a certain kind of meal that tastes a certain way, you would most likely imagine yourself eating that meal prior, and then you would go and have that experience. It was once imagined in some shape or form. So we want to know what we are imagining. In other words, what are we saying I am too? And we also want to know what we are combining imagining with feeling, specifically feeling that it is done, feeling that it is true, because that is in the process of becoming, as well as what has been brought forth on the screen of space, the world that reflects what we have been imagining and feeling to be true. Now, in the last video, we also talked about paradigms and how paradigms are a collection of beliefs, perspectives, and a theoretical framework, a philosophical framework for navigating reality, this outer world. Everybody has a paradigm, whether they understand it or not. And what our goal is to do is to recognize our paradigm and bring us into a paradigm that is a reflection of our vision, changing the concept of self. So I recommend studying the videos that I've been releasing lately on paradigms, beliefs, assumptions, and changing the concept of self. As Neville refers to no one to change but self, we realize that by changing the concept of self, we experience what is called allowing and inspired action. On the goal to create any kind of success, entrepreneurial success, whatever it is that you desire to bring forth, it is both a combination of allowing and action. Some things might require way more action. Some things might require way more allowing. But there is an intuitive ratio that is found when we maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled. In other words, when you maintain what James Allen refers to in The Heavenly Life, the divine center, we know what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and it may not make sense to anyone else, but as we look at the progress of our life, we're able to bring forth the results in a way that is unique and individualized. Thus, we learn to listen to ourselves and trust ourselves more. All of this happens on the journey to the fulfillment of what we desire to experience. And it is done by understanding how what we are imagining and the feeling that we give to what we are imagining is bringing forth what we experience on the screen of space, and make the changes accordingly so that we could live how we truly desire to live. Neville states, "That is what I mean by imagining, creating reality. For an assumption is faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please your own wonderful human imagination." So when we are imagining, we must imagine in faith, firm conviction, Otherwise, knowing that it is done. And we can use any kind of imagination method that we want to use. For me, it's affirmation, auditory-based imagination, inner conversation, and so forth. And others might prefer actually imagining a scene, which would imply. Now, this has a dual benefit. Number one is it helps us select in our imagination that which we desire to experience. And by adding the feeling that it is done, feeling the vividness and the realness of it, it brings us into a state of mind, and we live in and from that state of mind, thus experiencing the rearrangement of the five sensory experience to reflect. Another benefit to it is that it helps us calibrate and understand when we are out of that state of mind. And then we go back and imagine what it was like when we experience the outcome again and find ourselves back in the ideal state of mind. So this helps us to determine the destination as well as make the journey a lot smoother to the destination by maintaining the ideal state of mind, or the state of mind that is reflective to the vision. Now, what also ends up happening as a result of this is we experience paradigm change, core belief change. By dwelling in the ideal state of mind, the thoughts, the emotional integration, and the behaviors that flow from the ideal state of mind become a lot more fixed in what we refer to as the identity or self-image. It's the repetition of remaining in the same state, dwelling in the state. That's another benefit for picking a goal, committing to it in our imagination, and then remaining in that feeling of the wish fulfilled till it is fulfilled, because after it is brought forth, you still remain in that ideal state of mind and then continue to bring forth more and more success as a result of the identity change, the self-image change from dwelling in that state. He says, divine imagination containing all reproduces itself in human imagination. Therefore, the human imagination contains all. So we then have the power to go into our imagination and find out what we truly desire by asking ourselves, what do we truly want? How do we truly want to live? What do we truly want to experience? And from there, hunches and inspirations show up, and we can select that what we truly want to desire, because that we are connecting to the divine imagination, which contains all, recognizing that creation is complete, and what we do on this journey is move down through various different combinations of journeys based on our state of mind and our ability to remain in the state of mind. But a lot of times, if we don't understand how this works or maintain that state of mind, we can fall into different states of mind all throughout the day and thus get to the destination, which is what we desire to bring forth from a place of either combination of flow and force, or completely force, or completely flow. That's how we experience the journey. So knowing that everything exists in the divine imagination, our human imagination, which is one with, selects what we desire to experience. And then we move into the next part of this quote here, where he says, the world is the human imagination pushed out. So this is where we're looking at the five sensory experience, the screen of space, what we refer to as outer world reality. And the world is the human imagination pushed out. Not knowing this, man cheats himself, murders himself, declares war against himself, and does all sorts of evil against himself. But do not let yourself be intimidated by the horror of the world. Leave it alone, for it is only the misuse of the power exercised by the sleeping mankind. So we're all individual expressions of the same mind, and some of these individual expressions might be appearing to be asleep, and thus be creating certain kinds of behavioral patterns, not understanding the cause within that translates into the behavioral pattern. What we need to do is be the example of this, because by being the example of this, living the philosophy, what happens? is those that we experience on the day-to-day journey as we cross paths with them, because we are so affirmative of our ideal state of mind, they will reflect that ideal state of mind. They will go into that state of mind, not by us arguing with them or trying to convince them, but rather maintaining our ideal state of mind and observing as they change to reflect the ideal state of mind. Now, in neurolinguistic programming, this is said to be called frame control. Frame control. A good book to read is Pitch Anything by Oren Clef, and it is a sales book, and it is about doing presentations that facilitate funding, sales, or any kind of business deals that are related to capital, as in cash acquisition or any form of capital. One of the key things that he speaks about in there, and this is known through many sales training books, seminars, courses, or sales professionals that teach sales to their team and so forth, the ability to transfer the state of mind onto another person. The way we do it is not by saying, I want to transfer the state to another person, but rather maintaining the state of mind and observing how the state is transferred onto the other person. It's a very powerful position to be, and that is what we are saying I am to. I am that, what I occupy, which is that state of mind. And as a result of maintaining that state of mind and ensuring and committing to each day to maintain that state of mind, it becomes, as mentioned earlier, our identity. Then you'll notice that it is easier to perform if you're a coach or a consultant or a leader or anybody that you interact with, bringing a harmony in your outer world as a reflection of what is within your inner world, the concept of self. He says, knowing what you want, place your attention on its clarity of form, and then watch what you are imagining. So you've already assumed it to be done, whatever it is that you desire. Now we observe what we are imagining on the day-to-day basis and change those elements within, the beliefs within, the assumptions within, and so forth. Watch the last video I did on changing paradigms. This will be very helpful, as well as the discussions that we've had on assumption change and belief change in general, paradigm change, which was really the discussions we've been having for the last year or so. Are you remembering when you imagine something greater than what you have? If so, you are confessing you are not now imagining your desire fulfilled. If imagining creates reality, you must change your memory and become aware of what you are imagining right now. So when we imagine something, say it's the business success, we may put it on a pedestal and say, this is where I desire to be. When we assume it to be done, either through affirmation, conviction, or imagining it to be done, we automatically go into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. We can feel it. We feel this sensation that we know it's going to happen. Now, if we can maintain it, then that would be ideal. But however, we have stories and associations to our past, and we recreate those interpretations on the journey, the bridge of incidents, to the fulfillment. And we start to associate those interpretations to people, environment, circumstance, and information. It is very important then to ask yourself, on the journey, is what I am experiencing based on my interpretation from within disempowering me or empowering me? Do I see it as in alignment and in harmony with what I desire to experience, or in disharmony with what I desire to experience? If you see it as disharmony, you have the power to change it within, knowing that some of those meanings that we give to it come from past circumstances. Watch the video I did on pruning shears of revision, to go back and change certain circumstances that happened in your past, the meaning associated to those circumstances, so that you don't feel that same level of reactivity on the journey based on what shows up, if it is similar or somehow you relate it to what has experienced in the past, most of the time subconsciously. You'll know it through the reactivity. That's why I always say reality is both inspiring and revealing. Through the reactivity, you can uncover what meaning you are associating to whatever shows up on the five sensory experience and change it, thus maintaining your ideal state of mind. He says, practice the art of imagining and you will discover that you can go anywhere and enter any time without the aid of anyone. Move in your imagination and people will respond to your action. Dare to assume you are wealthy and watch everyone play their parts to provide you with the wealth you claim to have. They will, for they are yourself pushed out. So the idea behind this is maintaining the ideal state of mind. As a result of maintaining the ideal state of mind, you represent all the people that you think of from a place of love and harmony. You see them one with you, and as a result, you recognize that they are on your team. And what you'll notice is that this is how you'll carry yourself with your teams, your clients, your prospects, or whoever else that is on the journey to bringing forth the wealth that you desire. And as a result of representing that state of mind, maintaining that ideal state of mind, what you'll notice is that they will conform to that ideal state of mind, as we refer to the concept of frame control. Now, that's one way of explaining it, but it's a simple way of explaining it. And again, it comes down to what he says here. Dare to assume you are wealthy and watch everyone play their part. So you have to assume it, and assume it means that even if the five sensory experience denies it, you don't see the wealth right now, that you maintain the state of mind that translates everything as it's already done and I'm on the journey to the fulfillment. And as a result of doing that, we maintain the ideal state of mind. And as mentioned, if any circumstances show up that appear to, and the key word is appear, because it only appears to, deny the assumption that the meaning is from within. And we can change this meaning within and practice the art of imagination. We can imagine whatever it is that showed up on the journey as in harmony. For example, if you're building a team in your business, one of your team members doesn't seem to be as harmonious. You can create an affirmation, or you can imagine in your mind. Let's do the affirmation. You can say more and more so each day. They realize that we are on the same team. We are on the same vision. What I love is what they love. As a result, as I experience them more and more so each day, I find them in greater and greater harmony. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is ask yourself, what association, what meaning am I giving to this individual? Is it based on past experience in my life? Maybe it was a prior business or dealing with another team member before that it was a very challenging situation, and you're reassociating this experience that you're having with this individual with that person from your past. You go in and imagine that the way it happened in your past of how you related to that person was different in a way that brings forth harmony. Let's say that person in your past used to always argue with you. You now go into your imagination and recognize that that wasn't an argument. It was a conversation of bringing forth deeper degrees of realization, and that they helped you and contributed to where you are today. You then feel a greater sense of peace, and as a result, you work with your imagination, practice working with your imagination till you notice that your imagination is bringing forth a feeling of it is done. In this case, love, peace, and harmony towards this person on your team. As a result of that, you notice that when you show up and interact with the other person, you'll communicate in a way that's more harmonious. All of a sudden, you're communicating in a way that you both mutually understand. You're coming up with solutions together, solving business problems and so forth from a place of harmony. So we want to observe what we are imagining. We also want to, with what we're imagining, with what we desire to imagine, assume it to be true. And observe with what we are imagining that we don't desire to see happen, not assuming it to be true, by committing to the feeling, essentially dwelling in that feeling of disempowerment in relation to what you don't desire to experience on the journey, as well as your definite chief aim or your destination. He says what you feel deeply is far more important than what you are thinking. You may think about doing something for a long time and never do it. But when you feel something deeply, you are spurred into act, and God acts. He who is the cause of all life acts through the sense of feeling. You can think of 1,000 things, yet not be moved to act upon one of them. A deep conviction felt is far more important than anything you could ever think. So when we think about what we desire, when we think about the parts that make up the whole in the journey, we want to feel it from a level of conviction in our imagination. Feel it as done. And that level of conviction, that level of feeling that it is done, compels us into action and compels the five sensory experience to rearrange to reflect accordingly as a result of the state of mind that we embody once we enter that imaginal scene with association to the feeling that it is done to the imaginal scene, the association. So it's the association with thought and feeling. He says, look in the mirror and you will see your face reflected there. But you have another mirror which you can look into. That is the mirror of your friends. If they heard your good news, their faces would reflect it, would it not? Assume your desire is now a fact. Feel its substance and reality. And then let your friends see you in that state. They are your living mirror. So in other words, this is a great example. And I've noticed this all throughout my life, all throughout my journey. When I was operating from a place of flow and conviction and faith that what I desire is already done and I'm on the journey to the fulfillment of what I desire to experience, all people that showed up on my journey, no matter where I am, the people that I know or everywhere I was, appeared to be radically different than when I was not in that state of mind. And if for whatever reason may be, I fell out of my flow and I identified with dwelling in negativity or disempowerment, I noticed that those exact same people would reflect accordingly. Now, reflect on your journey and recognize where this is true. Because if you can identify where this was true in your journey, you have found this idea of how our state of mind is reflected in reality. And as a result of reference experience, it'll be easier for you to identify with the idea that imagination with the feeling of the wish fulfilled creates the experience, your day-to-day experience on your journey. So thus, imagining everything that shows up on the journey as in harmony, in contribution, seeing it how so, which we call converting obstacle into opportunity in the mind, and then feeling it as in contribution, knowing that it is done by changing how we relate to it, changing the meaning within, brings us into that ideal state of mind where we maintain in it, dwell in it, till it eventually becomes our identity. And that identity, the self-image, will become automatic at that point. So what you'll notice is everywhere you go, people will reflect that identity. And it could be radically different, completely different than how you experienced reality 1 or 2 years ago, or even months ago, or even weeks ago, provided that you remain persistent and consistent in that state of mind. That state of mind is what we embody, and I refer to it as flow, or you could see it as love, or you could see it as joy, or you could see it as bliss, or you could see it as harmony, or you could see it as conviction that it's done. Whatever I choose to experience is already done, and I'm on the journey, and I feel at ease. What this does is it allows, this goes back to the earlier part of our conversation where I said allowing the inspired action to flow from us so we know what to act, when to act on, how to act, as well as when to step back and allow. This is otherwise referred to in Taoist philosophy as Wu Wei, knowing when to act, when not to act, thus being very optimal with our actions and then allowing things to rearrange, which, by the way, may seem confusing when we're outside of our ideal state of mind, but when you get back into our ideal state of mind or flow, this stuff makes a lot of sense. This is otherwise referred to as confidence. Now, James Allen, in his book, The Heavenly Life, said it in a very interesting way. He said, "The secret of life, of abundant life, with its strength, its felicity, and its unbroken peace, is to find the divine center within oneself, and to live in and from that, instead of in that outer circumference of disturbances, the clamors, cravings, and argumentations which make up the animal and intellectual man. These selfish elements constitute the mere husks of life, and must be thrown away by him who would penetrate to the central heart of things, to life itself." Now, what Neville's philosophy is referring to is living the fourth dimensional self, living in and from the fourth dimensional self, or as James Allen refers to here, as the divine center, living in and from the concept of self that you want to embody in your imagination. That is what we're referring to, which transcends, as what James Allen refers to here, the clamors, cravings, and argumentations which make up the animal and intellectual man, the overly identified five sensory experience. Our goal is to integrate the five sensory experience with the sixth sense experience. The sixth sense experience can be looked at as your spiritual self. He says, knowing the law, instead of arguing with the man, just take him out of it. Now, he was referring to states of mind. And we were referring to earlier state transference and referring back to Oren Cleff's book, Pitch Anything. Now, we know this in sales, and having been in sales for so long and consulting and business consulting and consulting with many different businesses, with large organizations, small organizations, who many of them were very driven by sales because that's what brings everything in as far as capital goes. They were very big on training their sales team on best practices of sales. So I got exposed to all those things. And even when I was building my IT business and just all throughout my life, I've had a huge fascination with sales. And so much of sales is about embodying self-persuasion on the value. And this is what I brought up in the last video. The value that you have, the value the product or service has, and the recognition of the accurate truth that your prospects and clients are ready to receive that value, embodying that state that represents those attributes. And he says here, knowing the law, instead of arguing with the man, just take him out of it. So what we do is we don't argue with the prospects and the clients. We don't do that. If we do that, we risk going too much into the direction of force and falling out of our ideal state of mind. Those that are the best at doing these kinds of things maintain that ideal state of mind and have a conversation, or otherwise don't even have a conversation and observe as the other person changes. Again, this may seem kind of esoteric if we're so overly identified with the five sensory experience way of doing things with force, and we want to combine the five sensory experience with the sixth sense more and more so each day. And many people know this in sales, and this is how it works. It starts with changing the concept of self, dwelling in that state, and observing it externalize. He says, now in summary, single out some noble aim in life. Having defined it clearly to yourself as a desirable state, the state which you would like to externalize, ask yourself this very simple question. What would the feeling be like if it was true, if I already embodied that noble state? Now, we are also speaking about the feeling of naturalness. You will feel naturally aligned with that which you desire to experience. This is to be maintained if you want to maintain this and bring forth your results from a place of flow on the journey and to the destination. You don't have to maintain it on the journey, but I recommend it. Working with other businesses to bring forth entrepreneurial success, I've seen them do it from a place of force, and I've seen them do it from a place of flow. And when they do it from a place of flow and love, they enjoy the journey and the destination. And when they do it from a place of force, a lot of times they find themselves burnt out, stressed out, frustrated, and so forth. So enjoy the journey to the destination. And the way we do that is recognizing that it is done and maintaining the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If whatever shows up on the journey, recognize that we're interpreting it from within, and we can change the interpretation from within and give it an accurate interpretation that brings us back into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Watch the video I did on accessing states of mind, an NLP conversation. I'll put a link in the description to that. He says, when one wears the body of love. So this is the simple way of looking at it. When in doubt, do the loving thing. When in doubt, think the loving thing about whatever shows up, the person, the environment, the circumstance, and information. The feeling of love automatically brings us into the ideal state of mind. He says, when one wears the body of love, he is incapable of doing anything outside of love, and therefore everything in his presence is harmless. For perfect love casts out all fear. So what could show up on this journey to the destination? Fears, doubts, and indecision. Perfect love casts out this fear, doubt, and indecision, brings us to a level of understanding, accurate interpretation, the ability to bring forth inspired action, the ability to understand when to allow and not to act. All of this is found by maintaining that ideal state of mind, by developing and embodying a state of feeling of the wish fulfilled, which represents love, as well as on the journey, living that love and sharing that love with all you experience on the journey by how you think of them, how you assume them to be, or the same goes for environment, circumstance, and information. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.